Redditors, what is the most messed up thing you have ever done? My grandmother moved in with us when I was a teenager and started to go senile. Our relationship quickly soured. Living with her was different from sending her letters and making phone calls. It wasn't her fault. You change when you start to lose your mind. But honest to goodness, I couldn't stand her. Everything was my fault. Every single thing she misplaced, I stole. I must have stolen it. She couldn't accept that she just couldn't remember where she was putting things. The worst time, she had a meltdown over photos she'd misplaced and had my parents search my room while I shouted that I never touched them. I was a teenager. Why would I want to take her photos of the garden? I could just go outside if I wanted to see it, for fuck's sake. One night, I woke up because she was shouting for me in that nasally trill she always had that I'd grown to hate because of her constant theft accusations. Just my name, over and over. She was in the bathroom across the hall from my room. I didn't know what time it was. I figured it was early because she always got up at like 5 a.m. I figured she was shouting for me because she misplaced something again and was happily accusing me of going into her private bathroom that I never went near and taking it. So I thought some very angry choice words at her and pretended I didn't hear her. She cawed for me for 30 or so more minutes until it finally woke up my mom. I figured, there, now Mom can deal with you and I can sleep. Well, turns out her kidneys had shut down acutely. She was vomiting and excreting blood that whole time, yelling for me. Not to tell me I was a little thief again, but because she needed help. She was 85. That 30 minutes probably didn't make a difference, but she died a few days later, and while I know it wasn't my fault, her extended suffering was. I'm sorry, Grandma. I'm a recovered heroin addict, 9 years sober, and I have a lot of stories of how much of a shit person I used to be. I really can't gauge what my worst moment would be, but I can post a story or two definitely. One day, I was flat broke and on my last bag of dope. My neighborhood pharmacist just recently was arrested for a DUI. Brainstorming, I came up with an idea to try and get some pills at the ER. I still had med insurance at the moment, so I thought this was my best option. My buddy came by and we were hanging out outside, smoking a cigarette and trying to figure out how to get hurt. Just enough to get some pills, but not enough to actually have permanent repercussions. There was this big-ass cinder block beside my garage, and I decided to drop it on my foot in hopes of just breaking a toe, at most. I stood outside on the concrete patio for about 5 minutes with the cinder block, trying to hype myself up enough to drop it on my foot. I couldn't do it. Psyched myself out too much. I told my friend that he would have to do it for me, and he said okay. He held it about waist high and dropped it on my foot. I knew it wasn't enough damage, so I told him that he needed to put it up higher and drop it again, to which he did. So go to the hospital, tell them that I was carrying boxes downstairs to the basement and dropped them when I slipped on the bottom step. So I go back, get x-rays, and I'm in the waiting room. Doctor comes in and tells me that I've torn numerous ligaments in my foot and probably would hurt less if I just broke my foot. Hearing this, I was excited, thinking, yes, I just scored. I didn't care about the pain at the moment, just happy that I just potentially scored. They released me and handed me a script. They wrote me a script for ibuprofen 800 milligrams. Defeat. Too long, didn't read. Don't drop a brick on your foot trying to break it and get pills from the ER. Doesn't work. Was a night manager at fast food establishment during college. There was a bitter prank rivalry between our establishment and the Subway next to us. After months of prank escalation, I crammed a rotting hamburger patty in the handle of the Subway manager's trunk lid so he went knuckle deep in rotting burger when he went home. That was the end of the prank war, and I've never forgiven myself for crossing the red line. I'm gonna rat my little sister out. During our parents' divorce and custody battle, we were forced to sit in on family counseling sessions. I was 12 and she was 8. We thought my mom was acting funny and might have been banging the counselor on the side for her own personal testimonial interests. Still not confirmed. so we were pissed off because we loved our mom and dad. It seemed like the counselor favored our mom over our dad, and it got rough sometimes watching him become outed by the only two adult forces who didn't love him in this world. Anyway, my little sister and I were left alone in his office, and she decided she was going to take a shit in his little trash can to assert dominance. It was asserted. We never went back. This was an embarrassing one that I hope no one ever finds out. One night a few years ago, we, my boyfriend and his family, get Chinese food from our favorite little place. For some reason, this night it doesn't sit well with me. An hour after eating, I get that intensely sick feeling, like you have to poop so bad you want to throw up. Whatever, I go upstairs and destroy the bathroom. It's important to note there's 2 bathrooms upstairs and none downstairs, which is like a little apartment where my boyfriend and I stay. After I'm sure my bowels are empty, I go back down to lay in bed. Thought I could nap it off. Nah, about 30 seconds after laying down, I get the urge to go again. I run upstairs and to my horror, both bathrooms are occupied. His sister is refusing to get out of the shower even though it's an emergency, and his dad is blowing up the other toilet, presumably suffering a similar fate to mine. I begrudgingly go sit in bed and contemplate my options as the bubbling in my gut grows worse. Bust down the bathroom door and traumatize his sister? Make the 30-minute drive home? No, it was urgent. I even thought about shitting my pants, against my will, and dealing with the embarrassment. God, I don't want to subject my future in-laws to that. I begrudgingly realize my only option is to go outside like nature intended. Their yard is very open, and it was a super bright moonlit night, so there was no place to do it without feeling super exposed, except for under the trampoline. My thought process was, no one has used the trampoline for years, and it's out of sight, walking range, so no one could accidentally step in it. Great. I do my business, get soaked in the process. It was slightly raining, and the trampoline was pouring water on me. Clean up with napkins and wet wipes. Come inside. Immediately throw up in the trash can from the shock, embarrassment, anxiety, and sickness. Clean that up and immediately go to bed. Everything was fine for a few days until my boyfriend's dad lightheartedly tells me how he was late for work that morning. The dog had rolled in some shit and he had to get a bath. I felt like throwing up all over again, but thankfully everyone just suspected it was some type of animal poop. Picking up a dude's head that fell off his rotting corpse when I worked at a mortuary transport company is definitely up there. Also picking up a 5-year-old kid who had a bookcase fall on him, feeling all the broken bones moving in his tiny body fucked me up good. If we're talking behavior, I definitely attempted to ruin friends' relationships in my teenage years because I was a bitter and lonely asshole. Seeing them happy only made me feel worse, so I wanted to drag them down to my level. Luckily, their relationships were stronger than my bullshit in most cases. Edit. I've got a few messages asking questions about the mortuary job and whether or not these were the worst calls I've ever had, so I figured I'd post an old comment from a different thread. Trigger warning for suicide. Witnessed a woman pretty much break over the headless body of her son. Used to work for a mortuary livery service. I mostly picked up from retirement homes and from people's houses where they had a hospice nurse watching over them, but would occasionally get calls from the local coroner's office. One night I was sent out to a call not far from where I lived. The place was surrounded by cops. They led me and my partner to the bathroom where a guy had blown his head off with a shotgun in the shower. It was a mess, as you can probably imagine, but by this point it wasn't super out of the ordinary for me. I'd picked up suicides before, as well as overdoses, decoms, kids, so I was pretty numb to it. We got the guy into a bag and loaded him up on the gurney, and we're out the door at the worst possible time. The dude's mother was outside now, having been called by someone, I guess. She started hysterically screaming, which immediately put me on edge. I had dealt with crying and mourning loved ones every day. Even when I had to pick up the kid, his parents were already ushered into another room. But blood-curdling screams right in front of me? This was a first. A cop tried to grab her, but she managed to wriggle away from him, running up to the gurney and pretty much collapsing onto it, sobbing uncontrollably and babbling nonsense. It was the most raw and unfiltered emotion I'd ever seen. She was clutching onto the gurney and rocking back and forth to the point that I had to grab the cart before the whole thing toppled over onto the front lawn. I stood there for around 5 minutes with a front row seat to unrivaled agony with no way to really hide from it before a cop had stepped in and tried to pull her away, saying that we had to take him. She eventually relented and we got the body loaded into the car, and from there it was business as usual. The reason that one stuck with me so much is because, well, it was almost like looking into my own future. I was suicidal at the time, and the shotgun in the shower was exactly how I planned to do it. Only reason I was waiting was because I wanted to be in my own place, so my roommate didn't have to find me. The dude was even around my age. It was a weird feeling of almost like standing over my own body, and when I saw the woman break down, I could only see my own mom. It was at that moment that I decided that my mom would never scream and cry like that because of something I did. While the feelings are definitely still there, and I still think about death a lot, that night was when I decided that I would never do it, no matter how much it hurts. What sucks is that it almost made the pain worse. Before, I knew I had an out, a way to make this miserable shit end. But after that, I just felt trapped. Don't want to live, but now I can't die. Fuck. First fire call I was on was a DUI accident with partial ejection. I had to search for other people. I came back and wondered where the body was. Well, I was standing next to it. That got me good. Next one that was hard was being first on scene and it being my stepdad. It came in as TT versus car with Hilo on standby, then was cancelled. I opened the rescue door, saw the car, and sat right back down. I instantly knew it was his. I had to be sure though, so I got out, and that's when I saw him laying on the road. I grabbed the first person I saw, told them, and instantly lost it. Worst part was going to my mom's and telling her what happened. I still can hear her voice in my head from that. Oh, gosh, that's awful. When I was growing up, we went to the same church as the county coroner. He told us some horror stories of some of his calls. Beheadings from a wild boar flying through a windshield, wrecks where people's eyes had popped out from the force of the crash, etc. The one that haunted him, and no doubt haunts him still to this day, was his first call. He was at his birthday party shortly after assuming office and got a call. As he was driving up to the scene, he recognized the car. His heart sank as he realized it was his own younger brother. Can't remember if his brother was headed to the party or not. Did what he had to do as a county official, then just lost it. He was coroner for a decade after that, but my gosh, what an awful first day on the job. Surgical tech here. One of my patients was at the very tail end of pregnancy, but the baby wound up dying. She was in denial and refused care, and carried the dead baby for almost a month. I was on the team to get her a C-section when she finally came to get it out. The baby's skin was like wet paper. Any pressure anywhere caused it to tear. The muscles underneath had started to rot. The bones were mostly broken down to the point of providing no structure, so it moved like a baby-shaped water balloon. Face looked like something from a horror movie. Smell was easily the worst I've experienced. Room was eerily silent, including the mother, who was awake, which is normal for C-sections. Been a surgical tech for over 6 years, and that was by far the most fucked up thing that I've ever seen or done. That case was almost 4 years ago and still pops into my mind regularly. My hometown is generally pretty middle class to poor. There's a bunch of rich people that live in the woods, and one of them had a kid that went to our high school and bullied the fuck out of the kids that weren't as wealthy. That shithead grew up and bought a Camaro last summer and removed the muffler so it would be the loudest fucking thing in town. On New Year's Eve of 2021, he decided to ruin a town tradition and lapped the town common with it during the tree lighting ceremony, while people were caroling and giving thanks. Summer of last year, me and a friend decided it was time to get revenge because nobody wanted to do anything about it. My friend's dad owned a junkyard and they recently got an old train horn from a busted diesel that ended up there. We spent a good week getting it set up in the back of his work truck and decided to wait on it for a little while. A month or so later, we found out he was having a party of some kind with other rich folks and his family, but we didn't know what it was about, so we carefully parked outside his house on the opposite side of the fence. Right as it was starting, we blasted the train horn and peeled out before anyone knew what happened. News got out later, and we found out the party we bombed was actually a wake for his late grandfather. You know how people bag up their leaves and leave them out by the street? As a teen, we used to go out at night and dump them back out on people's lawns. Thinking about it now, I would be so pissed if someone did that to me. When I was about 15, a neighbor of ours stopped us on the road and chewed us out for riding our go-karts in the road. This despite the fact that it was a dirt road in a rural area which was the perfect place for riding go-karts. He was a complete asshole about it too. I don't know where I got the idea from, but I promptly went home, called the electric company, pretended to be the neighbor, and told them I wanted my electricity turned off as we were moving. It was the 80s, so they just looked the account up by name and address and promptly entered my request in the system. I'm sure it was just a minor inconvenience for them, but they deserved it in my opinion. Oof. The day before I stopped drinking alcohol altogether, I was in a really dark place for a number of reasons, and I was absolutely using alcohol as a crutch. One of the reasons why I was in such a bad place emotionally was because my cousin was in decline due to glioblastoma. I was actively seeing this person, that I loved dearly, lose his sense of self and ability to understand conversations and situations. And he was young, just turned 50. There was a lot of light in the beginning, but considering that glioblastoma is effectively a stageless brain cancer, it was almost guaranteed he would lose the battle. The day that I stopped drinking altogether was the day that I was supposed to drive him to a research institute for his monthly treatment and check-in. It was the only time I was asked to take on that level of responsibility, as his wife would normally take him. I helped in a bunch of different ways, like hanging out with him when he'd otherwise be alone, but his appointment was pretty big. I depressedly drank myself into a stupor the night before and missed our meetup time. I'd said that I'd be there no matter what, and I wasn't. The appointment happened, and he reassured me everything was okay as he knew the battle was over anyway. But I will never forgive myself for that. Even typing this out makes me feel like the biggest piece of shit. I wish I was sober then. Edit. A lot of people responded to this. Thank you for the kind words and reassurance. Edit 2. Even more people responded to this, and it's had me thinking. I think it's just time that I heard this stuff. This happened almost 2 years ago now. When I do something that I regret, it becomes a loud voice in the silence. That's usually when I think about regrettable stuff, and it's hard to turn off. This question made that voice really loud, and I think I'm going to try and reaffirm myself in those moments. It was a huge lesson in life, and I really do believe you'd be proud of me, as many have suggested. Thanks again. You're all disgusting. Anyways, I made the Pringles can fleshlight once. That's gross. Sometimes you can do really fucked up things without any intent or awareness. I was young and with a very nice woman who was struggling with some physical issues that resulted in a severe depression. We weren't living together, but I was regularly getting up early and going over to her place for breakfast, and to kind of just check in and let her know I was there for her. I went drinking with some friends one night, and I overslept the next morning. I called her to let her know I wouldn't make it. She committed suicide that day, before I got back from work. I know now that what happened wasn't my fault and I wasn't responsible, at least not in some overt way. We all make our own decisions. Still, I will always wish I hadn't been careless and overslept that day. If I had the chance to change one decision I've made in my life, this would be it. One time, a girl I had minimal interest in but had mutual shared friends with had sent me a text basically saying, "I have feelings for you and I'd like to explore where that takes us." I then typed up a message to my good friend saying, "Please kill me now, I think she wants a relationship." Keep in mind, this girl was nice and all, but just wasn't my type. I'm also a people pleaser, so the thought of having to turn down someone makes me uncomfortable, and I dreaded having to tell her I wasn't interested. I've been turned down before. It sucks. I don't want to do that to someone else. I did not mean the "please kill me now" as a knock on her as a person, but as a "I don't want to be in this situation." You can probably guess what happened though. Yep, I sent the "please kill me now" text to the girl. After immediately realizing what I did and thinking for about 30 seconds how I could possibly talk my way out of not sounding like the biggest jerk in the world, I realized that there was no good way to spin it. I decided to just try my best to explain to her that it wasn't meant to be mean and blah blah blah. I also said that she didn't deserve that. Blah blah blah. Didn't matter, I still cringe about it to this day. Oh, that's a long story. Stand in knee-deep sewage to pull grass because it had gotten too long in that area, apparently. Barefoot and barehanded. Thanks, Dad, for sending me to a behavior modification program in Jamaica that has virtually no child protection laws. Edit. So, the story. The program was called Tranquility Bay, located on the south coast of Jamaica, which is a dry and harsh climate unlike the pretty north coast for tourists. This happened in 1997, and my brother and I were both sent there within a year of the program opening. It was the second facility run by Ken K and JK and cost about $35,000 a year per kid, despite them claiming to be non-profit. The original facility was in American Samoa and called Paradise Cove. I think they had it worse than me because we had some kids transfer from there, and apparently molestation by the staff was common at the Samoa location. It didn't happen in Jamaica as far as I know. How did I end up there? Well, my brother was sent first. It wasn't his first program. He had been sent to military academy and things like that during summers for his misbehaving. He acted up in class, smoked weed, cigarettes, etc., but never had any legal trouble. When my dad sent my brother to Jamaica, it was too much for me and caused a major fight with my father, verbal only, and a falling out. Nothing unusual for a teenager. I was the well-behaved one, never had detention or got in trouble, and pretty much a goody two-shoes prep. With that known, everyone was surprised when 2 months later, I got sent to the same academy in Jamaica. The process of being sent. So I was in school, 16 years old, and during class my vice principal asked me to come speak with him in the hall. I wasn't concerned. I never get in trouble. When I got to the hallway, 4 grown men grabbed and restrained me and walked me to a car where I saw my dad waiting. At that point, I knew what was up and that I was about to be sent to the program. I didn't say a word to my father as I passed and was driven 8 hours away to an airport to lessen risk of a run attempt in an area that I knew. I was flown to Utah to a psychiatric care facility while they processed us for international travel. A week later, I was in Jamaica. The program. The program functions as a 6-step program that you can work your way out of to get to home. They removed every right and liberty we had. We had to request permission to speak, to stand up from our chair, to pass through a doorway, etc. As you progress through the program and move up through the 6 levels, you gain more privileges. It was a ruse though. I never knew of anyone making it to level 6 and get out. Why would they? That would cause the program to lose money. There were plenty of punishments of varying degrees as well if you did anything wrong. You may wonder why I didn't refuse to go back in the sewage and pull grass. Well, a refusal is a serious offense there and sets you back 3 levels. For most students, that would be setting you back all the way to the beginning of the program. I didn't want that. I wanted to graduate and get out, so I complied. How bad was the standard of living? Worse than US jail or prison, with the exception of concerns of rape and violence. We did not have hot water, air conditioning, proper medical care, etc. Did I get sick standing in that sewage? You bet your ass I did. Due to the large amount of sand fleas and mosquitoes in this tropical climate, most of us were usually covered in bug bites. Naturally, those bug bites got infected by the sewage, and I got a common illness there that we just called fat foot. The infection would cause your foot and ankle to balloon to double its size. No, this didn't warrant a doctor visit. They just applied antibiotic cream and hoped we'd get better. Thankfully it worked. Ringworm and other unnecessary illnesses were also common. Laundry wasn't sanitized properly. Again, no hot water, and we washed that by hand. Our food also was barely edible. I haven't been in prison, but I've seen TV shows try to show the slop they get fed, and that looks better than what we had in Jamaica. Where was my mom in all this? Fighting to get us back. She had the community behind her and lots of donations, went to the media, etc. It got attention, but didn't get us home. My parents were divorced, and my dad was remarried to a judge. With his multi-millions and her power, we didn't have a chance in the courts. How it came to an end? After 12 months, I was the highest ranked student in the program as the only level 5 out of a possible 6. My dad let me come home the day before soccer tryouts for varsity, which was big where I live. My brother was able to come home 2 months later. He was a level 4, and that made for a total of 16 months of him being there. I'm sure I left a million things out, so I'll try to answer any questions as they come. Any sort of behavior modification program seems horrible. They are, and they were never based on evidence-based treatment. The industry was started by an abusive cult that had a successful streak with helping drug addicts. Holy shit, what year were you there? I bounced around a few myself, but never got sent to Jamaica, but know of a few peeps who did. WWASP program kids have a few groups if you ever want to hash things out. It's open to all program kids, you just have to prove you went to one. Even though it was a shitty time, I saw and did some seriously fucked up things just to get home. I'm glad I went because the vindication was what got me to stand on my own 2 feet and learn to fight for what I want and have. I have my own family now and I'm doing well for myself despite my dad thinking I'd never amount to anything. He comes to me for advice now, which is tough because I really want to hate him, but I also want to be a better person. Sadly, the metrics on how many kids are still alive versus dead is just tragic. We have a few running lists of all the kids who've passed and the cause to try and remind our fellow brothers and sisters to not give up. RIP to those who have left us, and I hope you're finally home. P.S. They can staff that shit. Have a nice day, fellow survivor. Edited to add, although I understand many people are interested in the stories of people who attended these programs, I just can't for the life of me ever trade internet points or 5 minutes of fame at the cost of those who have died over it, either while there or after. I'm sure most people that went share this sentiment in some way or another. I'm not downplaying anyone, just that I know of a few who are in a tough spot financially and personally and stole others' experiences to try and make a quick buck and got caught. I'd be willing to share some experiences just so that people are aware that these programs still exist to this day, but it's difficult because if you went there at that time, you could pinpoint the people in the story, and I wouldn't want it to come back to those who have hid this past. It doesn't matter where you went or who had it worse. It doesn't matter if you were there for a month or 10 years. It hurt you in one way or another, and just know that there's support amongst us if you ever wanted to talk about it. What broke my heart is for a good while, I'd try and find my friends afterwards to catch up or help those I knew who had it rough while in. After months, or years in some cases, of trying and I get some info, I come to find that I had just missed them and they died a month or two ago. Sometimes it's an overdose, others it's suicide. The running list of obituaries is super fucking grim and has a significant amount of deaths. Rarely does anyone who went to these programs die of natural causes, so after a while, I gave up on trying to find people. That hurt even worse that I gave up due to it being easier to brush it under the rug. So since then, I've made it a point to always let others know that if you're hurting, I'm willing to listen if you need it. Doesn't matter how or why in life, but if you need someone to share the pain with, count me in. I'm sorry I wasn't able to find some of you sooner, but one day, we'll all be home together. Here's another edit to include a response I made to someone else below on asking how this is legal since many people are curious. So what happens a lot is as soon as a facility starts going under investigation, they'll sell it to a family member and the process has to start all over again. I know that for one of the programs I went to, a girl, RIP kind soul, hung herself from one of the stalls. That was before my time, but that cabin became our classroom, so it was very eerie having to do your business in that stall knowing that. Following that event was a huge CPS investigation, and I believe is the event that caused that facility to have to cut numbers in half to satisfy CPS. I believe most of the people were sent to the other programs while only a lucky few got to go home. That facility was massive and housed close to or around 1,000 plus students at one point. Another one I went to got shut down by CPS because a kid who had been there 3 days was jumped in the shower with staplers and had things put up inside him. He was somehow magically able to tell his parents, so they called the police and got the facility shut down. His parents loved him, and I'm glad they believed him and did something about it, but unfortunately, the majority of us just got shipped off to another program. They manipulated our parents and said we were shutting down due to some other BS. Our phone calls were monitored, and they'd always tell our parents that we were manipulated. Our phone calls were monitored, and they'd always tell our parents that we will manipulate them and say anything to go home. So our parents took their word as the gospel. Your freedoms were hinged on how you behaved. So if you squealed to your folks, you'd lose privileges. The difference was 3 hots and a cot. Or squeal and you get to sleep on the floor, no blankets, and stuck eating PB&J sandwiches and maybe a cold cut sandwich with meat, if you got lucky. Do you like outside time and playing football? Well, you guys can't because Johnny, Lucy, or anyone brave told their parents that we didn't feed them or shut off the hot water in the winter on them. Do you want to play? Do you want outside time back? Then you know what to do. So we'd throw what's called a blanket party. Throw a blanket over someone so they can't fight back and jump/beat them, and beat on someone so we could have TV time or outside time back. I am ashamed that I once beat a kid with a soap bar and a sock because he stole snacks sent from home from me. That wasn't even the worst part. Others caught wind of it and he got a blanket party thrown, but they put a belt around him on top of the blanket so he couldn't get away. They shaved his eyebrows off along with his head, and when he was writing his apology letter, they proofread it and rejected it. They made him tear it up, eat the apology letter, and start over and over until they got bored. The kid was bawling, and it haunts me whenever I recall it. I am so sorry that happened, man, and swear that I'm so sorry that happened, man, and swear that I'm a changed man. I did it because it was the first personal package that I was allowed to have after reaching level 3, and it took a lot to even get there. 6 months of intense brainwashing, and the first personal thing I got sent from home was stolen, so I felt cheated. Shit was fucking guerrilla tactics. They got away with a lot because it wasn't always staff that had to fix a problem. Take away basic human rights and you'll be shocked at the shameful things someone would do to another human being. The kicker is that the more you snitched on others, the further along in your program you were and the closer you were to going home. So it behooved others to throw people under the bus. Theft from the kitchen and shared with your bunkmates was normal, until they did inventory and decide to flip the cabins and search. At that point, it was every person for themselves. And guess what? Whoever snitches and saves us time will get extra privileges and any combo you want from McDonald's, as well as get to chill and eat snacks and drink soda in the air-conditioned staff office. Some people in real life think we make this shit up, so a lot of folks don't even bother sharing. However, you get a group of program kids together and it's like writing the fucking playbook for Gitmo. The Museum of Human Rights would have a field day with some of the stuff that goes on. I'm not downplaying other atrocious acts of humanity, but these programs really are that abusive. It follows you for the rest of your life. May life be kind to those who are not strong enough to change what they could change. We often recited the Serenity Prayer and it became very cult-like, but it has honest to God helped me cope with life.